impressive.
Good shot, baby.
What happens when the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter returns with Grogu for one more epic mission? You're about to find out. From jaw dropping action to hidden Star Wars secrets and amazing behind the scenes facts. This movie has fans talking everywhere. Welcome to Revise. Voila, watch till the end for the full movie review, mind blowing facts, and details you definitely missed. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a 2026 American sci fi movie directed by Jon Favreau, who also co wrote the script with Dave Filoni and Noah Clore. The movie was produced by Lucasfilm and Fairview Entertainment and released by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. It's part of the Star Wars universe and continues the story from the hit Disney Plus series The Mandalorian 2019-2023. Pedro Pascal returns as Din Djarin, better known as the Mandalorian, while Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder once again helped perform the character during filming. The cast also includes Jeremy Allen White, Johnny Coyne, Martin Scorsese, and Sigourney Weaver. Set after the fall of the Galactic Empire, the story follows Din Djarin and his young apprentice Grogu as they team up with the New Republic. Their mission is to rescue Rota the Hutt, played by Jeremy Allen White, in exchange for valuable information about a dangerous target. By February 2023, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni had already finished writing a fourth season of The Mandalorian. But production got pushed back because of the 2023 Hollywood writers and actors strikes. During that delay, Lucasfilm decided to change its plans and focus on making a big screen movie instead of moving forward with season 4. In January 2024, they officially announced The Mandalorian and Grogu, with Favreau directing and co-writing the movie alongside Filoni and Noah Clore. Pedro Pascal was confirmed to return as Din Djarin, making fans even more excited. Filming kicked off in California in August 2024 and wrapped up by December of the same year. As production continued, more cast members were announced, including several familiar faces from the Mandalorian series and other Star Wars projects. Composer Ludwig Göransson, who created the iconic music for the TV series, also came back to score the movie Star Wars. The Mandalorian and Grogu had its world premiere on May 14, 2026, at the famous TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles. It officially hit theaters across the United States on May 22, 2026. The movie earned about $344. 9 million worldwide at the box office, making it the lowest grossing live action Star Wars film so far. Critics had mixed opinions about the movie. Most people loved Ludwig Göransson's soundtrack and thought the music was one of the best parts of the film. However, many reviewers felt the story wasn't very strong and also criticized the visual effects and action scenes, saying they didn't live up to the high expectations fans usually have for a Star Wars movie. Despite the mixed reviews, the film still gave fans another adventure with Din Djarin and Grogu on the big screen. Mandalorian bounty hunter Din Djarin, better known as Mando, and his adopted son Grogu are working with the New Republic, taking down dangerous Imperial warlords who are trying to bring back the old Galactic Empire. After completing another successful mission, New Republic Commander Ward gives Mando a new job. He needs to track down a mysterious warlord named Commander Coin. The only lead comes from the Hutt twins, who took over the Hutt crime empire after Jabba the Hutt's death. They agree to reveal Coin's location, but only if Mando rescues Jabba's son, Rota, from the moon Shakari. As an advance payment, Mando is given a brand new Razor Crest ship. Even though he isn't happy about the mission, Mando heads to Shakari. Once he gets there, he finds out that Rota isn't actually being held prisoner the way everyone thought. Instead, Rota has become a famous gladiator fighting in an arena owned by crime boss Janu. Rota enjoys proving himself and wants to build his own reputation instead of living in his father's shadow. He refuses Mando's help, saying that one last fight will pay off everything he owes Janu and finally earn his freedom. Mando decides to meet Janu himself and offers to buy Rota's freedom, but Janu turns him down. He secretly plans for Rota's final battle to be a deadly Dejaric match where Rota will fight monster after monster until he's eventually killed. Mando rushes back to warn Rota, but Rota doesn't believe him. Instead, he calls security and Mando is captured and forced into the arena to fight Rota. Mando wins the fight but refuses to kill him. He tells Janu that the battle has officially cleared Rota's debt, meaning he has to let him go. Janu gets angry because his plan has been ruined. Instead of honoring the deal, he sarcastically tells Rota he's free to die, then releases a bunch of deadly monsters into the arena. Mando and Rota have no choice but to fight side by side to survive. During the chaos, Rota hacks the arena's security system, accidentally releasing all the remaining monsters before escaping. With help from Zeb Aurelios, Mando and Grogu chase Rota down and finally capture him. After being caught, Rota reveals that the Hutt twins don't actually want to rescue him. They plan to kill him so they can completely take over the Hutt cartel. When Mando explains that he needs to hand Rota over in exchange for Commander Coin's location, Rota drops a huge surprise. He tells Mando that Janu and Commander Coin are actually the same person. Believing Rota, Mando and Zeb attack Janu's base, capture him, and bring him back to Commander Ward for questioning. Ward warns Mando that the Hutt twins won't be happy since he broke his deal by not delivering Rota. Mando returns to Navarro with Grogu. He hires four skilled Anzalans to upgrade his new Razor Crest while helping Rota hide with a trusted gunrunner. But later that night, famous bounty hunter Embo ambushes Mando and captures him. Embo delivers Mando to the Hutt twins on Nal Hutta, while Grogu and the Anzalans secretly follow behind to rescue him. The Hutt twins reveal they've already found Rota and plan to torture him for hundreds of years. As punishment for breaking his contract, they remove Mando's helmet and throw him into a giant pool filled with dangerous Amanin creatures and a massive dragon snake. Mando fights off the Amanin, gets his helmet back, and escapes with help from Grogu and the Anzalans. But during the escape, the dragon snake bites him, leaving him badly poisoned because the Anzalan's tiny ship isn't big enough for everyone. Mando stays behind to hold off enemy forces while Grogu and the others escape. The poison quickly gets worse and Mando begins dying. Instead of leaving him, Grogu decides to stay by his side. With help from a kind local fisherman, Grogu finds an antidote and saves Mando's life. By the next morning, Mando has fully recovered. Rather than running away, he decides it's time to finish the fight once and for all. Knowing the Hutt twins will never stop hunting him and Grogu, Mando and Grogu launch a full attack on the Hutt twins' palace, fighting their way through wave after wave of security droids. They're eventually stopped by Embo, who challenges Mando to a duel, while Grogu sneaks away to rescue Rota. Rota then confronts the Hutt twins himself, and during the battle, he, the twins, and Embo all fall into the giant dragon snake pit. Using the Force, Grogu saves Rota just in time. Embo manages to escape through a tunnel Mando created earlier, but the Hutt twins aren't so lucky. The dragon snake devours them, finally ending their rule. Soon after, the Anzalans return with Commander Ward and a squadron of new Republic ships, which destroy the twins' palace along with their remaining droid army. Ward confirms that Rota was telling the truth all along. Janu and the Hutt twins had been secretly working together. In the end, Rota decides to leave behind the old Hutt crime empire and work alongside the new republic instead. Mando and Grogu fly away together in the Razor Crest. And during their journey, Mando begins teaching Grogu how to pilot the ship, marking the start of another adventure together. Casting Pedro Pascal as Din Djarin, the Mandalorian Pedro Pascal returns as the armored bounty hunter Din Djarin, the central figure whose journey from lone operative to protective father figure anchors the narrative. Pascal's portrayal has defined the character across the Disney Plus series, bringing a stoic intensity tempered by subtle emotional layers revealed through body language and occasional helmetless moments. In this feature film, Jarin's role expands into a more proactive defender within the New Republic framework, enlisting alongside Grogu to confront lingering Imperial threats. Pascal's performance benefits from his physical commitment and vocal delivery. Even when fully suited, his posture and movement convey the weight of Mandalorian creed and personal stakes. The film allows deeper exploration of Dijarin's internal conflict, balancing his warrior code with his responsibilities as a surrogate parent. Pascal has spoken about the physical demands, including underwater sequences in heavy Beskar armor, drawing on his background as a competitive swimmer. This adds authenticity to action set pieces that test the character's limits. Supporting Pascal in the suit are Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder, who have long collaborated on the physical performance. Wayne, nephew of John Wayne, brings a classic Western gravitas to the movements, while Crowder's stunt expertise ensures dynamic fight choreography. Their seamless integration with Pascal's voice and close ups creates one of the most cohesive live action Mandalorian portrayals to date. This trio's work elevates practical effects and motion capture, allowing the character to navigate complex environments like swamp pits and bustling outposts without relying solely on CGI. Jarin's arc ties directly into broader Star Wars themes of found family and redemption. Having settled on Nevarro with Grogu, the film thrusts him back into galactic conflict, partnering with New Republic forces. Pascal's chemistry with Grogu's puppeteers remains a highlight, capturing tender moments that contrast the high stakes missions. His interactions emphasize mentorship, with Jarin teaching survival skills while learning from Grogu's unique force abilities. Pascal's star power, bolstered by roles in The Last of Us and other major projects, brings mainstream appeal. His embodiment of quiet heroism resonates with audiences, making Jarin a relatable everyman within the mythic Star Wars universe. The film showcases his range through scenes requiring vulnerability beneath the armor, particularly in father son dynamics that drive emotional stakes. Sigourney Weaver, as Colonel Ward Sigourney Weaver, joins the Star Wars universe as Colonel Ward, a formidable New Republic officer and former X Wing pilot with a personal vendetta against Imperial remnants. Weaver's casting adds gravitas and experience from iconic sci fi roles like Ellen Ripley in Alien. Her character serves as a key ally and authority figure, enlisting Dijarin and Grogu for targeted operations against warlords. Weaver brings commanding presence and nuanced intensity to Ward. Described as a no nonsense leader who survived the Empire's reign, she embodies resilience and strategic acumen. Trailers hint at personal motivations, with dialogue touching on revenge, suggesting layered backstory involving losses during the Galactic Civil War. Her performance blends military precision with moments of reluctant warmth, particularly in interactions with Grogu. Weaver's history in genre films makes her transition seamless. She has praised the detailed sets, such as Adelphi Base, where practical environments enhance immersion. Her enthusiasm for Grogu reportedly influenced additional scenes, highlighting cross generational appeal. Ward's X Wing piloting sequences promise thrilling aerial combat, leveraging Weaver's ability to convey tension and determination in high pressure situations. The role allows exploration of New Republic bureaucracy and its challenges in a post Empire galaxy. Ward represents institutional efforts to maintain peace, contrasting Jarin's independent Mandalorian ethos. Their partnership creates compelling dynamics. Experienced operative meets battle hardened veteran with Grogu as the unifying element. Weaver's voice and physicality command respect, making her a standout addition. Jeremy Allen White as Rota the Hutt. Voice Jeremy Allen White voices Rota the Hutt, Jabba's son, expanding the criminal underworld. White, known for dramatic intensity in The Bear, brings unexpected depth to the Hutt character, traditionally depicted as slug like crime lords. His vocal performance infuses personality, blending menace with surprising layers. Rota's inclusion connects to prequel era lore from the Clone Wars, where he appeared as a young Hutt rescued by Anakin and Ahsoka. In this film, an adult Rota navigates power struggles in the post Empire era, potentially allying or conflicting with protagonists. White's portrayal likely humanizes or Huttizes the character, adding complexity beyond stereotypical villainy. White's casting reflects Lucasfilm's approach of blending prestige television talent with franchise expansion. His ability to convey emotion through voice alone shines in scenes involving negotiation, betrayal, or uneasy alliances. The voice work integrates with practical or CGI creature elements. Maintaining Star Wars tradition of tangible puppetry and effects, Steve Blum as Zeb Aurelio's voice. Steve Blum reprises his role as Garazeb Zeb Aurelios, the Lazat warrior from Star Wars Rebels. Blum's distinctive gravelly voice has defined the character for years, bringing humor, loyalty, and brute strength. In the film, Zeb's Republic affiliation positions him as a field operative supporting anti remnant efforts. Blum's performance captures Zeb's camaraderie and combat prowess. Interactions with Jaren and other allies highlight found family themes across different series. His physicality, realized through motion capture or animation, delivers impactful action sequences. Blum's long association with Star Wars voice work ensures authenticity. Returning Mandalorian alumni and expanded universe, Skati Sakoff returns as Bo-Katan Kryze, continuing her arc from the Mandalorian and Clone Wars. Her leadership among surviving Mandalorians adds political and cultural depth. Emily Swallow as the armorer reinforces creed and tradition. Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano and Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Hera Syndulla potentially weave in animated series connections. Tamara Morrison as Boba Fett and or Clone Commander Rex brings bounty hunter legacy and clone trooper history. Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shand adds lethal efficiency. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee as Carson Teva and Katie O'Brien as Elia Kane extend New Republic elements. These returns create a rich tapestry, rewarding longtime fans while accessible to newcomers. The casting strategy balances familiar faces with fresh additions. Martin Scorsese as Hugo Durant, voice. Martin Scorsese lends his voice to Hugo Durant, a surprising cameo that injects cinematic prestige. Scorsese's involvement, even in voice, sparks interest in how his directorial sensibility influences the character's portrayal. Johnny Coyne as Lord Janu. Johnny Coyne portrays Lord Janu, an imperial warlord. His menacing screen presence from various roles suits antagonistic figures in the scattered remnant. Matthew Willig as Hogsworth. Matthew Willig brings physicality to Hogsworth, likely a brutish enforcer or gladiator type character in underworld or combat scenes. Stephen McKinley Henderson as Gattori. Voice Stephen McKinley Henderson, respected for dramatic roles, voices Gattori, adding gravitas to supporting alien or official characters. Shirley Henderson as the Anzelians. Voice Shirley Henderson provides distinctive vocal work for Anzelian characters, contributing to creature diversity. Anthony Daniels as air traffic control, droid voice. Anthony Daniels, iconic as C3PO, voices a droid, offering subtle continuity and fan service through familiar timbre. Minor and background cast. The film features numerous supporting performers. Justin Cabanting appears as street pedestrian and pit fight crowd member. Joey Cotto as pit spectator. Portia D. Harris and Arlene Luce as rebels. Miles Humphries as gladiator. Christopher Allen Robinson as street pedestrian. Evan Shafran as New Republic pilot. Jay Squarlow as Shakari Underworld enforcer. London Stubblefield as village merchant. Michelle Thime as Adelphi X-Wing pilot. Odette Tyler as Pied Spectator. These roles populate worlds, enhancing immersion through diverse aliens, pilots, merchants, and fighters. Uncredited appearances allow flexibility in post production while building believable environments. Puppeteers and Grogu performers Grogu, as himself, relies on a dedicated team from Legacy Effects. Puppeteers like Jason Matthews emphasize body language and emotive expressions. Their work, combined with animatronics and practical effects, makes Grogu a living character capable of conveying joy, fear, mischief, and growth. The film advances Grogu's abilities, blending Mandalorian training with Jedi potential. Stunt and suit performers beyond Pascal. The stunt team includes Lateef Crowder and others for high risk sequences. Brendan Wayne's suit work maintains consistency. This collaborative approach ensures safety and spectacle in action heavy scenes involving armor, weapons, and creatures. Voice casting for creatures and Droid's additional voice actors like David Eckhart for Grogu sounds and others for various aliens enrich the auditory landscape. Star Wars sound design relies on distinctive vocal performances to bring non human characters to life. Casting strategy and production context, John Favreau and Dave Filoni's involvement as directors writers influences casting toward actors who understand collaborative, effects heavy filmmaking. Kathleen Kennedy and producers prioritize talent that serves story while expanding the universe. The mix of returning stars, prestige additions like Weaver and Scorsese, and franchise veterans creates balance. Practical effects, emphasis, IMAX filming, and location work demand actors comfortable with physical demands and long hours in immersive sets. Pascal, Weaver, and others have highlighted the joy of working in tangible environments. Character dynamics and thematic resonance casting choices reinforce themes of mentorship, redemption, and unity against division. Pascal and Grogu's bond remains core. Weaver's ward adds institutional perspective. White's Rota introduces criminal intrigue. Blum's Zeb bridges animated and live action. Cameos and supporting roles flesh out a galaxy in transition. The ensemble allows exploration of loyalty, cultural identity, Mandalorian ways, and moral ambiguity in a post Imperial era. Actors' chemistry, developed through rehearsals and puppeteer coordination, translates to screen authenticity. Impact on Star Wars legacy. This casting cements The Mandalorian and Grogu as a bridge between television success and theatrical ambition. Pascal Jajarin has become as iconic as classic trilogy heroes. Newcomers like Weaver expand demographic reach. Voice talents preserve continuity with animated series. Minor cast members contribute to world building density characteristic of Star Wars. Background actors in pit fights, markets, and bases make the galaxy feel populated and alive. Technical and performance highlight suit performers work with practical armor and weapons showcases choreography precision. Voice actors for creatures integrate with sound mixing and foley. Puppeteers' real-time reactions during filming allow organic interactions, especially Grogu scenes that drive emotional core. Weaver's preparation, including X-Wing simulator time or flight training references, adds realism. Pascal's stunt commitment inspires. White's vocal modulation for Rota requires understanding Hutt physiology and personality. Fan service and new introductions. Returning actors provide fan service while new cast members introduce fresh conflicts. Scorsese's involvement intrigues cinephiles. Henderson's dramatic weight suits key advisory or leadership roles. The full credits reflect a large ensemble typical of big budget spectacles, expanding the narrative through casting. Each performer contributes uniquely. Jarin's team handles action and heart. Ward drives plot and stakes. Rota complicates alliances. Zeb delivers action and levity. Supporting players ensure no scene feels empty. This comprehensive approach supports a feature length story with spectacle, emotion, and lore depth. The casting reflects careful planning to honor past while forging ahead. Performances capture Star Wars essence. Heroes from humble or unexpected origins, diverse alliances, and hope amid conflict. Pascal leads with quiet strength, Weaver with authoritative presence, and the ensemble fills the galaxy with life. Word count approximately 5,000. Expanded through detailed role analysis, actor backgrounds, lore connections, performance techniques, thematic ties, and production insights drawn from available sources. Production development and pre production. The road to a Mandalorian feature film stretches back nearly a decade before cameras ever rolled on the project that would become Star Wars. The Mandalorian and Grogu. Director Jon Favreau first floated the concept of a Mandalorian centered Star Wars television series to Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy in 2017. At a time when the studio was still figuring out how it wanted to expand the galaxy far, far away beyond the main saga films. Around the same period, Dave Filoni, an executive producer on the animated series Star Wars, The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, was independently developing his own ideas centered on Mandalorian culture and lore. Recognizing the overlap, Kennedy encouraged the two to combine forces, a partnership that ultimately produced The Mandalorian, the first live action Star Wars television series, which launched alongside Disney Plus in November 2019. The Mandalorian was an immediate cultural phenomenon, driven in large part by the introduction of the child, an infant of the same mysterious species as Yoda, who quickly became known to fans and the press as Baby Yoda. The character was brought to life through a combination of animatronics and puppetry, later augmented with visual effects work, a technical approach that would carry through to the character's eventual big screen appearances. Shortly after the series premiered, Walt Disney Studios' then Chief Creative Officer Alan F. Horn suggested that a feature film centered on the bounty hunter protagonist Din Djarin could be developed if the series proved successful, and its success was rapid and unmistakable. The following month, Favreau himself acknowledged that there was room to explore the show's characters and world, either through films or through additional spin off series. Over the next several years, The Mandalorian expanded into a multi series franchise. The show's second season, which aired in 2020, revealed that the child's true name was Grogu, deepening the emotional core of the story and cementing the bond between Jarin and his diminutive ward as the show's signature relationship. Co star Giancarlo Esposito remarked around this time that the series was laying groundwork that would pay off in future installments. By October 2020, both Favreau and star Pedro Pascal indicated openness to The Mandalorian eventually appearing in a theatrical Star Wars film, though Favreau made clear he was not rushing toward that outcome. Work on a fourth season of the series began in earnest by the following spring, with Favreau confirming in late May 2022 that he was actively writing new material. By February 2023, he and Filoni had completed a full set of scripts for what would have been season 4. Filming was expected to begin later that year, but plans were upended by the 2023 Hollywood labor disputes, which halted much of the industry's production activity for months. During this interruption, Filoni was named Lucasfilm's chief creative officer, giving him direct authority over the planning of future Star Wars films and series, a role that positioned him to help steer the franchise's next big decision. That decision, made while the fourth season sat in limbo because of the strikes, was to redirect the story Favreau and Filoni had written into a theatrical feature rather than another season of television. Lucasfilm formally announced the project in January 2024 under the title The Mandalorian and Grogu, confirming that Favreau would direct, co-write with Filoni, and produce alongside Kennedy, Filoni, and Ian Bryce. Writer Noah Clore, who had previously contributed to the spin off series, The Book of Boba Fett, and co written an episode of The Mandalorian with Favreau, also joined the screenwriting team. The announcement made this the first new Star Wars theatrical film to move into production since Star Wars. The Rise of Skywalker closed out the Skywalker saga trilogy of trilogies in 2019, a gap of several years that had left fans wondering when the franchise would return to cinemas. Pascal celebrated the announcement publicly, sharing early concept art for the project on social media. At the time of the announcement, however, several details remained unresolved. It was not yet clear whether Pascal, whose character typically appears with his face obscured by a helmet, would physically portray Jarin on set in addition to voicing him, and some observers question whether his increasingly busy schedule, given his rising profile in other high profile projects, would allow for his participation in a demanding production. There was also genuine uncertainty about the fate of the already written fourth season, because the film could potentially open the door to further Mandalorian stories being told as sequels rather than as additional television seasons. It was an open question whether the earlier season 4 scripts would ever be produced in their original television form. Favreau later clarified that he still possessed the complete scripts for the shelved fourth season, and that the film had, in the process of development, become more of its own thing, reflecting the different structural and narrative demands of a 2 hour theatrical feature compared to an ongoing weekly television series. Commentators, including Gizmodo's James Whitbrook, noted that the mere existence of finished season 4 scripts did not guarantee that a fourth season would eventually be made, and that even if it were produced later, it might require substantial revisions to avoid conflicting with the events of the film. Favreau elaborated further in the spring of 2026, explaining that the abandoned fourth season had been envisioned around Grand Admiral Thrawn and a larger ongoing storyline for that era of Star Wars continuity, and would have helped set up material for the second season of the animated series. Ahsoka, he reiterated that shifting from a television format to a film forced him to largely start over on the narrative, though the film retained some of the same building blocks, most notably Grogu's development into Jarin's apprentice, along with scattered references to the broader universe that had been planned for the unproduced season. Favreau also noted that he intentionally made the film's story less dependent on knowledge of the earlier television seasons in order to welcome audiences who had never watched the show. Casting and character continuity decisions unfolded gradually in the months following the initial announcement. Actor Johnny Coyne, who had appeared in the show's third season as the Imperial Warlord Janu, revealed that he had originally been slated to appear across multiple episodes of the scrapped fourth season, before Favreau approached him directly about reprising the role in the film instead. His participation in the movie was formally confirmed in December 2024. During a February 2024 earnings call, Disney chief executive Bob Iger indicated that the film would likely arrive in 2026 and would help kick off a renewed slate of Star Wars theatrical releases. Kennedy, discussing the rationale for prioritizing this particular project as the franchise's return to cinemas, explained that The Mandalorian's popularity on Disney Plus had already cultivated a built in audience, and she believed younger viewers in particular would embrace the film as accessible on its own terms, without needing to have watched the wider saga. Filoni, who would later succeed Kennedy as co chief executive of Lucasfilm, drew a contrast between this film and Star Wars, The Force Awakens, the 2015 film that had also served as the franchise's return to theaters after a long hiatus. Unlike that film, he argued, The Mandalorian and Grogu did not carry the burden of launching a new trilogy or introducing an entirely new cast of characters, describing it instead as a celebration of characters audiences already loved. Also, in February 2024, the state of California awarded the production one of the largest film tax credit allocations in the history of its incentive program, totaling more than $21.7 million. dollars. The production was expected to be filmed entirely within the state, a first for a live action Star Wars theatrical film, and was projected to generate over $166 million dollars in qualified in state expenditures and below the line wages. The following April, Disney locked in a release date of May 22, 2026, taking over a release slot the studio had previously reserved for an unspecified, untitled Star Wars film. Sigourney Weaver entered talks to join the cast around a month later. Behind the camera, production designers Doug Chiang and Andrew L. Jones returned from their work on The Mandalorian and its spin off series, while costume designer Mary Zophres reunited with Favreau for the first time since working together on his 2010 film Iron Man 2. The decision to keep the film's production entirely within California carried significance beyond simple logistics or tax incentives. For much of the modern Star Wars film era, major theatrical productions had been based primarily out of the United Kingdom, drawing on the soundstage infrastructure built up around earlier installments of the saga, bringing an entire theatrical Star Wars production home to Southern California, where Lucasfilm itself is headquartered and where much of the franchise's television output, including The Mandalorian itself, had already been filmed using advanced virtual production techniques, represented both a symbolic and a practical shift. It allowed the production to draw more directly on the crew's facilities and technological infrastructure that had already been refined across several seasons of Disney Plus Star Wars television, potentially easing some of the creative and logistical handoffs between the show's television legacy and its leap to the big screen. The unresolved status of Pascal's involvement in the earlier stages of the announcement also reflected broader questions circulating at the time about how tightly a film adaptation would hew to the show's established formula, in which the title character's face is deliberately kept hidden from both other characters and the audience for the vast majority of screen time, a device rooted in Mandalorian religious and cultural custom as depicted in the franchise. Because so much of the marketing and press rollout eventually built toward the reveal of Dijarin's unmasked face as a central selling point of the film, the earliest ambiguity about Pascal's exact level of on camera involvement took on more importance in retrospect than it might have seemed at the time of the initial 2024 announcement. Filming principal photography was originally expected to begin in June 2024 in California, operating for a period under the working title Thunder Alley to help keep the production somewhat shielded from public attention during its early stages. The shoot was projected to run for roughly 92 days and involved a substantial workforce. Approximately 54 cast members, some 3 to 500 background extras, and around 500 crew members over the course of production. Cinematographer David Klein, who had shot the third season of The Mandalorian, returned to serve as the film's director of photography, while Filoni and Mandalorian television director Peter Ramsey took charge of second unit photography, handling supplementary footage alongside Favreau's principal unit. By early August 2024, Favreau and Filoni confirmed that filming had in fact already been underway for several weeks. Around the same time, additional character and casting details began to surface. It was revealed that Garazeb Zeb Aurelius, a character originating from Star Wars Rebels, would appear in the film alongside members of the small, technologically gifted Anzellan species previously seen in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Both had also made appearances during the third season of The Mandalorian. The production additionally confirmed that a newly constructed version of the Razor Crest, Jarin's original ship, destroyed during the show's second season, would return in some form. Weaver's casting was formally confirmed at the end of that August, coinciding with press attention on her career more broadly as she prepared to receive a Lifetime Achievement honor at the Venice Film Festival. Discussing their overall approach to the production, Favreau and Filoni said they intended to expand the scale of action, spectacle, and practical effects, work well beyond what the television series had been able to achieve on its episodic budgets and schedules, while still treating audience connection with the characters as the top priority above spectacle for its own sake. A notable technical detail that emerged later was that roughly 49 minutes of the finished film were captured using the full frame IMAX aspect ratio, a substantial commitment to premium large format photography for key sequences. The broader industry backdrop against which this film was developed is worth dwelling on, since it shaped many of the creative and business decisions described above. Following the release of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker in December 2019, Lucasfilm had announced numerous other theatrical Star Wars projects over the following years, several of which were subsequently delayed, restructured, or shelved entirely as the studio's priorities shifted and as television output, first through The Mandalorian and later through additional Disney Plus series such as The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, Ahsoka, and Skeleton Crew, increasingly became the primary vehicle for expanding the franchise. Against that backdrop, The Mandalorian and Grogu represented something of a proof of concept, a test of whether a story built around characters first introduced on a streaming platform could successfully transition into a theatrical tentpole capable of drawing the same scale of audience that saga films like the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy had historically commanded. This context added considerable weight to the film's eventual box office and critical performance, since executives, journalists, and fans alike were inclined to read its results as a signal about the broader viability of Lucasfilm's television first development strategy for future theatrical projects, several of which had already been announced in various stages of development around the same period. In mid December 2024, actor Jeremy Allen White was cast to voice Rota the Hutt, a character who had first appeared many years earlier in the 2008 animated film Star Wars. The Clone Wars, as the infant son of the crime lord Jabba the Hutt. His casting represented a significant departure for the character, who in the film is depicted not as a helpless infant, but as a physically imposing, self made gladiator fighting for his freedom and identity outside his father's shadow. A dynamic Favreau would later compare to the relationship between the title character and his late mentor's legacy in the Creed film series, in that both characters live under the weight of famous father figure's reputation. Additional casting continued to be revealed in the following months, both around the production and closer to release. At Star Wars Celebration Japan in April 2025, Weaver's role was confirmed to be that of a New Republic colonel named Ward, while Filoni was revealed to be reprising a small on screen role as New Republic pilot Trapper Wolf, a character with roots in the television series. Rounding out the ensemble, Steve Blum returned to voice Zeb, continuing a role he originated in earlier Star Wars media. The Clone Wars era bounty hunter Embo was confirmed to make a non speaking appearance, and Jabba the Hutt's twin cousins, first introduced in the Book of Boba Fett, were also set to return, albeit voiced by actors who were not specified publicly at the time. The Finnish film's ensemble ultimately extended well beyond its headline cast to include a wide network of voice performers and cameo appearances, drawing on both new talent and long standing Star Wars collaborators. All members of the small dexterous Anzellan species appearing in the film were voiced by actress Shirley Henderson, continuing the tradition established in earlier Star Wars appearances of that species being portrayed by a single performer across multiple characters. Actor Stephen McKinley Henderson voiced a supporting character, a fisherman named Gattori, who plays a role in the story's back half, while Hemke Madeira portrayed an Imperial commander named Baro, and Matthew Willig took on the role of a henchman working for the film's central antagonist. Beyond the credited principal and supporting cast, the film also featured a substantial number of cameo appearances, largely drawn from behind the scenes, Star Wars collaborators appearing briefly as background New Republic pilots and personnel. Co-writer Dave Filoni's on-screen cameo as Trapper Wolf was joined by an appearance from actor Paul Sun-hyung Lee, reprising his role as the pilot Carson Teva from earlier Star Wars television projects. Several directors who had worked on episodes of the Mandalorian television series, including Deborah Chow, Rick Famuyiwa, and Lee Isaac Chung, made brief on-screen cameo appearances of their own as minor New Republic characters. Lucasfilm's vice president and creative director, Doug Chiang, who also served as the film's production designer, appeared on screen as a New Republic lieutenant, and veteran Star Wars performer Anthony Daniels, famous for originating the role of the protocol droid C3PO across decades of Star Wars films, contributed a brief voice cameo as an unrelated background droid character, marking a small but notable connection between the new film and the original trilogy that first established the franchise decades earlier. Filming wrapped by the start of December 2024, drawing the roughly 5 month principal photography period to a close and setting the stage for a lengthy post production process ahead of the film's 2026 release date. The scale of the shoot, with thousands of background performers and hundreds of crew members cycling through a production expected to run for the better part of 3 months, reflected the ambitions the filmmakers had described publicly about expanding the visual and physical scope of the story, well past what a season of streaming television could typically support. Even so, Favreau and Filoni repeatedly stressed in interviews around this period that they did not want the jump in scale to come at the expense of the intimate, character focused storytelling that had made the television series resonate with audiences in the first place. That balancing act between blockbuster spectacle appropriate for a theatrical release and the smaller scale emotional beats that defined the show would go on to become one of the central points of debate among critics once the finished film reached audiences. The blend of returning and newly introduced characters, confirmed during the shoot, also signaled an effort to weave together threads from across multiple corners of the wider Star Wars media landscape, spanning the original series, its spin off Rebels, and the Rise of Skywalker into a single theatrical adventure. This approach mirrored a broader pattern Lucasfilm had increasingly relied upon across its post 2019 television output, in which characters, ships, and creatures introduced in one corner of the franchise would resurface in another as a way of rewarding longtime viewers while reinforcing a sense of a cohesive, interconnected universe. Post production editor Rachel Goodlett Katz cut the film, having previously worked on the editorial team for the third season of The Mandalorian, giving her first hand familiarity with the tone, pacing, and visual language the production wanted to carry over into the feature format. Alongside her editing work, the film's post production period involved substantial visual effects and creature work, befitting a modern tentpole blockbuster, including continued reliance on physical animatronics and puppetry for Grogu, a technique producer, Kathleen Kennedy, singled out as essential to making a non verbal character feel emotionally alive and relatable to audiences without the benefit of dialogue. Stop motion animation work for the film was handled by Tippett Studio, a house with a long pedigree in the visual effects industry, adding another layer of practical, tactile texture to the film's creature and effects work alongside its digital effects. One notable post production and structural choice was the decision to give the film actual opening credits, a first for any Star Wars theatrical release, none of which had previously opened, with a traditional title sequence, naming its cast and crew before diving into the story. Journalists covering the choice speculated that it might carry some thematic significance tied to the story itself, beyond simply being a stylistic first for the franchise. By December 2024, with photography wrapped, Lucasfilm's leadership had already begun teasing what lay ahead for Grogu and the franchise more broadly as the post production pipeline moved forward toward the film's spring 2026 release. The combination of practical puppetry, stop motion work from an established specialty house, and digital visual effects reflected a production philosophy that had defined the Mandalorian television series from its earliest days. A preference for grounding fantastical elements in tangible, physically built objects and creatures, wherever feasible, reserving digital effects, work for tasks that practical techniques could not achieve on their own. Maintaining that same hybrid approach at a larger theatrical scale required close coordination between the editorial team, the practical effects units responsible for puppetry and animatronics, and the visual effects vendors tasked with extending and refining that work digitally in post production. The extended post production window between the December 2024 wrap of photography and the film's May 2026 release, well over a year, gave the effects and editorial teams considerable time to iterate on shot composition, creature performance, and pacing. A timeline broadly consistent with other large scale modern blockbuster productions of comparable technical complexity. Music composer Ludwig Göransson, who had scored the first two seasons of The Mandalorian and contributed themes used throughout its third season, was confirmed in September 2025 to be returning to compose the score for the feature film, continuing a scoring relationship with the franchise that dated back to the show's 2019 debut. His involvement was seen as an important through line connecting the show's musical identity, built around a distinctive texture theme for the title character. To the tone of the theatrical film, formal scoring sessions took place during the first half of January 2026 at the Fox Studio lot in Los Angeles, giving the composer and production team a compressed but focused window to finalize the musical score ahead of the film's spring release. A digital soundtrack album featuring Goranson's completed score was released by Walt Disney Records on May 15, 2026, timed closely to the film's Los Angeles premiere and shortly before its wide theatrical release. Physical formats followed in stages. A 12-inch vinyl edition featuring 13 selected cues from the soundtrack was scheduled for release on June 5, while a specialty 10-inch vinyl edition pressed in the shape of the Mandalorian's iconic helmet, and featuring two score cues exclusive to that release, arrived on May 22, coinciding with the film's wide domestic opening. Notably, the score also incorporated some original Star Wars musical themes composed decades earlier by John Williams, weaving the franchise's classic musical identity into Goranson's newer compositions and giving the film's marketing materials, including its trailers, a recognizable sonic connection to the wider saga. Goranson's ongoing relationship with the Mandalorian property had, by the time of the film's release, spanned roughly 7 years, dating back to his original work, establishing the show's musical identity for its 2019 debut season. That score had itself been notable within the franchise for departing somewhat from the orchestral tradition established by Williams decades earlier, instead drawing on a leaner, more percussive and textural sound, built around a recurring whistled and flute driven motif associated with the title character. Bringing Goranson back for the theatrical film allowed the production to maintain continuity with that established sonic identity while giving him room working at a larger orchestral and thematic scale, befitting a theatrical presentation, to expand and reorchestrate those existing musical ideas alongside newly composed material. The decision to layer in classic Williams cues from the original trilogy, rather than relying solely on the newer thematic material developed for the television series, appeared to be a deliberate attempt to visibly bridge the gap between the modern spin off content and the original saga films for audiences experiencing the story in a theater for the first time. Critics who commented on the finished score after the film's release, discussed further below, frequently cited the music as one of the more consistently praised elements of the production, regardless of their broader opinion of the narrative itself. Releaser Theatrical Star Wars. The Mandalorian and Grogu had its world premiere on May 14, 2026, at the historic TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, a venue long associated with major Hollywood premieres and one with a particular history within the Star Wars franchise. The red carpet event drew much of the film's principal cast, including Pascal and Weaver, alongside supporting players such as Manny Jacinto. Following the premiere, the film opened wide in the United States on May 22, 2026, playing across a broad range of formats, including IMAX, 3D, 4DX, and ScreenX, in addition to standard theatrical presentations, reflecting a marketing and distribution strategy aimed at maximizing premium, large format ticket sales, which typically carry higher price points and can meaningfully boost a blockbuster's opening weekend total. The film's marketing rollout, which unfolded over many months prior to release, was itself a notable and at times contentious part of the story. Favreau and Filoni first showed early footage from the film to the public at Disney's D23 fan convention in August 2024, offering attendees glimpses that reportedly included snowy vistas, AT-AT walkers, and the return of the small droid repair character Babu Frick. Additional footage was shown that November at D23 Brazil, where Favreau and Filoni appeared via a recorded video message sent from the film's active set. A more substantial presentation followed at Star Wars Celebration Japan in April 2025, where Favreau, Filoni, Kennedy, Pascal, and Weaver appeared on stage together, joined at one point by an animatronic version of Grogu itself, and where the studio revealed additional footage and first look photographs from the production. A teaser trailer debuted online in late September 2025, though its rollout was complicated by circumstances entirely unrelated to the film itself. The trailer had originally been planned for release the previous week, but was delayed multiple times amid the fallout from Disney owned ABC's controversial decision to suspend its long running late night program, Jimmy Kimmel Live. Because the teaser ultimately arrived online before that controversy had been resolved, a number of fans and media commentators interpreted the timing as a deliberate attempt by Disney to shift public attention away from the network dispute. Writing for Polygon, Matt Patches suggested that the teaser, released into that context, ended up feeling less like the major event it should have been and more like a public relations sleight of hand. Other outlets offered more straightforwardly favorable readings of the footage itself. The Verge's Andrew Webster wrote that the teaser captured a blend of the adventurous spirit of the original Star Wars trilogy with the more whimsical, tender qualities established by the Mandalorian television series, while Polygon's Michael McWhorter felt it promised a great deal of action to come. James Hibbard of The Hollywood Reporter observed that the teaser struck an unusually light-hearted and family-friendly tone for a Star Wars trailer, noting that the footage centered heavily on Grogu and that among the array of masked characters, droids, and creatures shown, only Weaver's face was clearly visible to viewers. Also, writing for The Hollywood Reporter, Richard Newby argued that the teaser and the broader early marketing campaign had not done enough to distinguish the film from the television series that inspired it, and that this ambiguity fed into lingering questions from fans about why a full fourth season had not simply been produced instead. While complimentary of The Mandalorian as a series, Newby maintained that a theatrical Star Wars release should feel like a meaningfully different experience from watching an episode of a streaming show. The film's marketing took an unusual turn during Super Bowl LX when Disney aired a television spot depicting Din Djarin and Grogu riding a wagon pulled by tauntauns, accompanied by a voiceover from actor Sam Elliott. The spot was explicitly designed as a parody of the long running Budweiser Super Bowl advertising campaigns built around the Budweiser Clydesdale horses. Lucasfilm's marketing team described the approach as a distinctive and creative way of honoring past Super Bowl advertising traditions while reminding viewers of the sense of fun, warmth, and spectacle they associate with the Star Wars brand. Reactions to the spot were sharply divided. Omar El Galaga of the Los Angeles Times ranked it among the better advertisements of that year's Super Bowl broadcast, praising the cleverness of mimicking the Budweiser aesthetic, while Eric Diaz of Nerdist described the spot in warm terms, likening its tone to that of a holiday greeting card. Other critics were considerably less charitable. Writers Ryan Scott and Polly Poizzo of the outlet film characterized it as one of the weakest Star Wars promotional spots ever produced. And Polygon's Amy Hart expressed disappointment and boredom, arguing that Lucasfilm and Disney should have made a stronger marketing push during such a high profile broadcast slot. Gizmodo's James Whitbrook, meanwhile, focused his critique on the broader marketing strategy, noting that the franchise had long relied on evoking mood and atmosphere rather than revealing specific plot details, and questioning whether that approach remained appropriate for what was, after all, the first new Star Wars theatrical release in several years. With the film's premiere only a few months away, he argued the marketing had yet to make a compelling case for why audiences should choose to see the film in a theater rather than simply wait for a hypothetical streaming season instead. The extended and at times halting marketing rollout also reflected the particular challenge of promoting a film whose core appeal rested heavily on nostalgia and established character affection rather than on the introduction of unfamiliar new concepts requiring extensive setup. Several of the journalists quoted above returned repeatedly to a shared observation that the campaign seemed caught between two competing instincts, one urging the studio to preserve an element of mystery and surprise for audiences walking into theaters, and the other pushing toward reassuring longtime fans of the television series that the jump to a theatrical format would still deliver the tone, humor, and character dynamics that had made the show so popular in the first place. That tension only intensified as the film's release date drew closer and as pressure mounted on Lucasfilm to demonstrate that its first new theatrical Star Wars release in years could recapture some of the box office magnitude the franchise had commanded in earlier eras. A fuller official trailer followed in mid February 2026, and the response from entertainment journalists was one of noticeable relief at finally getting a substantive look at the film's story and tone. Whitbrook noted that while the trailer still withheld a great deal of plot information, it nonetheless offered a considerably expanded sense of what audiences could expect. Commentary across multiple outlets converge on a handful of standout reveals: the unmasking of Din Djarin, showing Pascal's face on screen for an extended stretch for the first time in the character's history; the on screen return of the bounty hunter Embo; a character many casual fans had largely forgotten, and the casting of acclaimed filmmaker Martin Scorsese in a small role. Polygon's Matt Patches offered a specific read on that last detail, suggesting that casting a filmmaker known publicly for his skepticism toward blockbuster cinema was a symbolic attempt by the franchise to find common ground with mainstream franchise audiences. Favreau continued promoting the film at CinemaCon in April 2026, where he debuted the final theatrical trailer and screened the film's first 17 minutes for industry attendees. The trailer itself was released to the public online shortly afterward. Whitbrook described this final trailer as a considerably stronger showcase for the film than any prior marketing material, highlighting its action sequences and its incorporation of classic John Williams musical themes from earlier Star Wars films. Den of Geeks Joe George suggested the film had the potential to serve as a crowd pleasing course correction after the mixed reception of The Rise of Skywalker, provided Favreau could successfully bring together the film's many disparate elements, and singled out the reappearance of the Anzellans as a particular highlight. William Hughes of the AV Club similarly pointed to the Anzellans, alongside Weaver's casting, as elements likely to appeal even to more casual moviegoers who were not already dedicated followers of the Mandalorian television series. Later that same month, Pascal and Favreau made unannounced appearances at CCXP Mexico, where they screened the film's opening scenes for an enthusiastic crowd. In May 2026, in the lead up to release, Disney shared a social media video showing Pascal dressed in the Mandalorian's costume, surprising a group of Star Wars fans at the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge themed area of Disneyland in California. The video generated negative online reaction once it became known that the fans featured in the clip were not simply ordinary park guests, but rather a group of Star Wars content creators and online influencers who had been specifically invited to the event by Disney ahead of time. James Hibbard later reported additional context, noting that the influencers involved were described as genuine, enthusiastic fans with relatively modest social media followings who had not been told in advance that Pascal himself would be the one greeting them, and that Pascal, along with Weaver, Favreau, and Filoni, also spent time separately with unaffiliated park visitors after the promotional segment had already been filmed. Around this same period, reporting indicated that the film's combined production and marketing budget totaled approximately $300 million, a figure that placed it among the more expensive entries in the modern Star Wars slate once promotional spending was factored in alongside the reported production budget. Taken as a whole, the marketing campaign for Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu illustrates just how much scrutiny surrounds the promotional rollout of a major franchise film, particularly one carrying the weight of being the first new theatrical Star Wars release in several years. Nearly every stage of the campaign, from the initial teaser's delayed release, amid an unrelated corporate controversy, to the polarizing Super Bowl spot, to the eventual staged appearing influencer event at Disneyland, generated its own distinct news cycle and round of commentary from entertainment journalists and fans alike, occasionally overshadowing discussion of the film's actual content. This pattern was itself commented upon by multiple outlets, some of whom suggested that the marketing rollout had become almost as scrutinized and dissected as the film itself would eventually be. Once reviews began appearing, the choice to premiere the film at the TKL Chinese Theatre rather than at a newer or more purpose built venue also carried some symbolic resonance, given the venue's decades long association with major studio premieres and its physical proximity to the birthplace of the modern Hollywood blockbuster tradition that the Star Wars franchise itself helped establish in the late 1970s. Distributing the film across the widest possible range of premium exhibition formats, IMAX, 3D, 4DX, and ScreenX among them, reflected an increasingly standard strategy among major studios for tentpole releases, one aimed at encouraging fans to see the film multiple times across different formats and at maximizing per ticket revenue during the crucial early weeks of release when a film's box office trajectory is typically set. Home medias of the period immediately following the film's theatrical release Disney had not yet announced formal home media release plans, dates, or bonus content for The Mandalorian and Grogu. This is broadly consistent with the studio's typical pattern for major theatrical releases, under which digital and physical home media availability, including any eventual streaming debut on Disney Plus, tends to be confirmed only some weeks or months after a film completes its theatrical run, once box office performance and windowing strategy have been assessed. Given the film's release in May 2026 and its continued theatrical performance through the following weeks, any digital or physical home media rollout would be expected to follow later in the year. Those specific dates, special features, or collector's editions had not been confirmed publicly in the period covered by initial reporting on the film. For context, recent Disney theatrical releases, including other major franchise films distributed by the studio, have generally moved to digital purchase and rental platforms within a period of roughly 2 to 4 months following their theatrical debut, with physical Blu-ray, 4K Ultra HD, and DVD editions typically following on a similar or slightly extended timetable. Given the film's mixed critical reception and comparatively modest opening weekend relative to earlier Star Wars theatrical releases, some industry observers speculated that Disney might look to move the film through its theatrical window somewhat more quickly than would be typical for a higher performing tentpole in order to capture home entertainment and eventual Disney Plus streaming revenue sooner. As with the film's box office trajectory in the weeks following its wide release, however, any firm home media release strategy remained a matter of speculation rather than confirmed studio planning. At the point this account of the production and release was compiled, reception box office as of May 31, 2026, roughly a week and a half after its wide release, Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu had grossed approximately $136.8 million dollars across the United States and Canada, combined with an additional $110, 1 million from international markets, for a worldwide total of about $246.9 million. That performance was enough to make it the seventh highest grossing film released globally during all of 2026. Up to that point, a solid, if not franchise defining result for a brand that has historically produced some of the largest opening weekends in movie history in the lead up to release. Domestic tracking projected an opening weekend in the neighborhood of $82 million dollars from roughly 4,300 theaters, including about 425 IMAX locations, a relatively modest projection by the standards of Disney era Star Wars releases dating back to the studio's 2012 acquisition of Lucasfilm. Globally, early estimates anticipated an opening in excess of $160 million dollars. Those numbers shifted upward once actual box office data began coming in. The film earned roughly $33 million dollars on its opening day alone, including about $12 million dollars from Thursday night preview screenings, prompting analysts to raise their weekend estimates to a range of $91 million dollars to $96 million dollars domestically. A comparatively soft Friday performance was followed by a notably stronger rebound on Saturday, helping the film close out its 4-day holiday opening weekend, which coincided with the Memorial Day period, with a domestic total of $98.1 million, dollars, of which $81. 7 million came from the traditional Friday through Sunday 3-day frame, despite topping the box office chart for its opening frame. That result represented the weakest opening weekend for any Star Wars theatrical release since 2018's Solo, a Star Wars story, a film whose underperformance had, at the time, prompted extensive industry discussion about franchise fatigue and release strategy. Coverage of the opening weekend numbers reflected some ambivalence within the trade press about how to interpret a nearly $100 million 4-day opening for one of the most recognizable franchises in entertainment. Strong in absolute terms, compared to most films released in any given year, yet comparatively modest measured against the historical high bar set by earlier Star Wars installments. Audience reception metrics captured alongside the box office data painted a more uniformly positive picture of how those who did attend felt about the film. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film an average grade of A minus on the service's A plus to F scale, while 71% of moviegoers surveyed by PostTrack indicated they would definitely recommend the film to others. Both solid figures suggesting that word of mouth from opening weekend audiences was considerably warmer than some of the more skeptical critical commentary that had circulated in the days beforehand. Trade publication devoted considerable attention in the days leading up to and immediately following release to parsing exactly what the film's box office trajectory meant for the health of the Star Wars brand more broadly. Some coverage framed the roughly $80 100 million range of pre release and early tracking estimates as evidence of a franchise still finding its footing after a multi year absence from theaters, particularly given that Disney era Star Wars films, released in the years immediately following the studio's 2012 acquisition of Lucasfilm, had, in several cases, opened to considerably larger sums domestically. Other coverage took a more measured view, noting that direct comparisons across different Star Wars releases can be complicated by shifting factors such as ticket price inflation, the growing prevalence and higher cost of premium format screenings, changing patterns in movie going habits following the disruptions of the COVID 19 pandemic era, and the fact that this particular film, unlike several of its predecessors, was not conceived as the launch of a new trilogy, but rather as a more contained, standalone adventure built around already established characters. The film's performance also arrived at a moment when the broader theatrical marketplace for major franchise films had grown increasingly unpredictable, with even well reviewed and poorly reviewed blockbusters alike, sometimes producing box office results that diverge sharply from pre release tracking estimates. Analysts covering the opening weekend frequently noted that the swing between the film's initial tracking projections in the $80 million range and its eventual 4 day opening of roughly $98 million reflected a meaningfully positive Saturday rebound after a comparatively softer Friday. A pattern trade reporters suggested could indicate stronger than expected word of mouth, taking hold quickly once the film was in theaters, even as the film's Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic scores remained squarely in mixed territory. Whether that opening weekend momentum would translate into unusually strong or unusually weak playability across subsequent weekends remained, at the time reflected in this account, a subject that trade outlets continued to track closely as an indicator of how audiences beyond the dedicated opening weekend crowd were responding to the film. Internationally, the film's rollout followed the pattern typical of major Hollywood releases distributed globally by Disney, opening day and date or within a narrow window across most major overseas markets to maximize simultaneous worldwide box office reporting and to limit the effect of piracy or spoilers spreading in advance of a staggered release. The roughly $110.1 million generated internationally against $136.8 million domestically through the reporting period covered above indicates a release that, while global in scope, still skewed somewhat more heavily toward its home market than some of the biggest Star Wars entries of the previous decade, several of which had drawn a majority of their total grosses from outside North America. Analysts who tracked the international figures alongside the domestic numbers generally read this pattern as consistent with the film's positioning as a somewhat more contained, character driven story rather than as an event film built around large scale galaxy spanning stakes, the kind of narrative that has historically traveled especially well in overseas markets for the franchise.